What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Dude Hines Show. Today is July 12th, 2021. On this video, I am live on YouTube, and on today's episode, I have special guest Blake Jude joining me. How you doing today, Blake?
Doing very well. It's been a pretty uneventful couple of weeks in the world of sports, but I'm doing pretty well overall.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of sports talk to be talking about. There was Game 3, of the NBA Finals, and that's kind of where, our first topic we'll be talking about. So what were your kind of, thoughts on, Game 3 of the Finals and everything with the Bucks and the Suns?
It's a dominant performance by Giannis and the Bucks. It was a good bounce back game for sure. The Suns have been rolling this entire playoffs. Have been nearly unstoppable with Chris Paul and Devin Booker whenever they're both on the floor together healthy. But you finally see, I guess, this fully healthy Suns team almost get dominated by Giannis and the Bucks a little bit, and it kind of gives them a bit of an awakening call because everyone kind of thought this was pretty much the Suns series to lose now, and I think they're suddenly a good contender finally to challenge him in this championship. And of course, Giannis has been going off these last couple of games. I think he's been the best player on the court overall throughout the series so far, despite the Suns still having a 2-1 lead. He just has little to no help right now. And once he's able to find that help in Drew Holiday, Chris Middleton, Brook Lopez, those guys, if he can get that help, they definitely have a shot to come back in this series. I predicted the Suns in 6 whenever the series first started. So it doesn't surprise me that the Bucks are now starting to come back a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if they even win Game 4 as well. I think this is a team that is legitimate, and they are a very good team, talented team. And if they can work together and have enough balance around scoring-wise, I think they can really, really challenge the Suns. The Suns are going to have to be able to find a way to stop Giannis, and I don't know if that's possible at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I also had the Suns in 6. Nathan from the podcast I'm a big fan of says Suns in 5 or 6. Yeah, that's how we kind of feel. With the Bucks playing yesterday, I expected them to win yesterday, but the way they played though really surprised me. The way they played, the Suns didn't even play horrible in my opinion. They didn't play great by any means, but not horrible. Kind of average, I guess you would say. But the way the Bucks played, Giannis played great. Middleton played good for the most part. Holiday, really stepped up. He's been kind of inconsistent throughout the finals. And when you have guys like Bobby Portis, who are averaging 3 points in the finals, get 10, 15 points a game, whatever it was yesterday, step up with those guys like Middleton, Holiday, Giannis, just having normal games they're supposed to have, it's going to be nearly impossible for you to beat the Bucks yesterday. It could have been the Lakers. It could have been the healthy Warriors team. It could have been the Nets, whoever. It would have been very difficult to beat the Bucks. They were not missing at all. There was a couple of times, they were getting, foul calls in their favor, but, that had nothing to do with the game. They were just playing great. Everything was going their way. They were getting rebounds, shots, threes, everything. They honestly probably could have even beat Team USA yesterday they played. I know it sounds crazy, but they lost to Nigeria in an exhibition game. But, the Suns didn't play horrible like I mentioned. It was just everything went the Bucks' way. And when a game like that, you're pretty much screwed. You have pretty much no chance of winning unless you're shooting lights out like your opposing team. It's nearly impossible for you to win. And the Bucks played great. And I think this next game is honestly probably the biggest game of the series because this, 2-1, the Suns. That's how I expected it to go. I thought the Suns, would get home court, win both those games. I definitely thought the Bucks, would bounce back in Game 3. But this game is very huge because if you tie it up, and if you pull off a sneaky, shocking upset in Phoenix, all of a sudden we could possibly see, Milwaukee kind of taking control of the finals. But I'm not surprised the Bucks won at all. I'm just surprised how great they played on every, part of the game, rebounds, shooting threes and everything like that.
Yeah, it felt like anytime the Suns are trying to create momentum to try to come back, you would see the Bucks take over and score 5 or 6 points to take the lead and control the game right back over. Pretty much, everything, like you said, almost everything happened well for the Suns. Everything kind of fell the right way. And plus, with that momentum being in their home court, having the fans behind their back at this point, this is the first time in the last 2 years we have seen a finals with full fans in the stadiums. So I think now that is starting to finally play into effect. You can kind of tell by how these first 3 games have gone, how that has fallen in the home team's favor. The Suns obviously had the momentum and the opportunities to continue to stretch their leads and make it bigger in game 1 and 2. And of course, the moment the Bucks went to Milwaukee game 3, they took over and did the exact same thing. So game 4 here, if the Suns, like you said, it's a big game. The Suns can take game 4. They have complete control of the division. They're up 3-1, going back to their home place to finish it all off. If they lose, however, Game 5 is going to be huge because, like you mentioned, if the Bucks managed to somehow win Game 5, that is huge for Milwaukee. And all of a sudden, like you said, they could take advantage of this series for sure. So, Game 4 and 5 is really always going to be what determines, I think, most series. And depending on who takes, if the Suns are able to take one of those games, I feel like they have a good chance of winning it all. But if Milwaukee can take both of those, what a huge, gain that would be. And it could end up being a very exciting series if it manages to happen somehow.
I feel like if let's say the Bucks get a upset road victory or the Suns get an upset road victory, whoever wins in the road has that upset win is definitely going to win the series. I feel like home court advantage this particular season is much different than we've seen in years past because we've not had fans in the arenas in the NBA Finals for 2 years like you mentioned, and it's different if it was like the Lakers or Celtics or somebody who's a team who's been in there pretty much, quite a bit. But when you have the Bucks who I don't think, they've not won a championship since the 70s. The Suns, I don't think have even won a championship before. So when you have two teams who have not been good and all of a sudden they have, amazing seasons and a crucial game, a series that nobody really expected to happen between the Suns and the Bucks, and the way some of these games have played so far, home court advantage is having a huge impact on this series, much more than we've seen in years prior. So you kind of mentioned Suns in 6, and I mentioned Suns in 6 as well. What my prediction was heading into the series. Are you going to stay with that prediction, or are you going to change it up a little bit, or what?
I'll stick with it for now. I've got these first 3 game predictions right so far. I predicted the Suns to win the first 2 and the Bucks to win game 3. I think I have the Suns winning game 4. So if Milwaukee's able to win game 4, I might change my answer. I might even lean towards Milwaukee in 7 at that point. But for now, I'm going to stick with Suns in 6 until any of my predictions become wrong. Because game 4, like you said, is going to be a very huge game. And like I said, I have the Suns winning. If the Suns can take a 3-1 lead, I can see the Bucks maybe taking one extra game, maybe in a desperation game 5, trying to take a game to try to send it further down the line. But at that point, I think it's pretty much over. But if the Bucks win again and it tied up in the 2-2 series going to game 5, it's going to be huge at that point. And that's when I think you could probably see a game 7 or possibly even leaning towards Milwaukee winning it all.
Yeah, I want to say my prediction as well as game 6. This, game 4 to me is very interesting. I think the Bucks can win, but at the same time, they have to have kind of a similar, performance they did, yesterday. Because, the Suns are going to play better. Because, like I said, they didn't play great by any means, but, they were just pretty much average. Nobody stepped up at all. But, I mean, I think the Suns will probably pull off the upset because, and I agree with what you said there with a game 5, the Bucks, desperation win there to go into game 6, and the Suns will win, in 6 games in Phoenix. But, yeah, I think in Phoenix. But it's very interesting to me. I'm just glad it's not top market teams in the finals like the Celtics. I mean, I like the Celtics, but I like seeing other teams who aren't in it. I mean, especially the Bucks and Suns. Like I mentioned, we haven't seen, those teams in the finals and absolutely forever. It's going to be really interesting to see, how the remaining of the finals goes, who ends up winning the NBA championship. And kind of switching gears to wrestling, talked about the finals, going to the WWE first. The New Day was voted the greatest WWE tag team ever, according to WWE. Do you agree with that vote, or do you think there's maybe a different tag team who should take that crown?
So I may be biased, but I'm not even kidding. I believe the first episode I watched of WWE was whenever the New Day formed their tag team. I believe that. I think that's whenever I first started getting into it myself and watching the shows. I haven't been watching it nearly as much as what I did before, but back in this is back in 2013, 2012, maybe, whenever this happened. So I believe I was like 12 or 13, just trying to find new shows. And I saw that and I was like, all right, I'm down. So Kofi Kingston was always, one of my favorite member of the New Day for as long as I can remember. And I always loved watching him. I would watch old highlights of Kofi and his old rivalries, and he became one of my favorite wrestlers. I would say at this point, my favorite wrestler ever in WWE. So I've been a huge fan of the New Day forever. So, I don't really have the old nostalgia to really recognize the older teams. I know like the Hardy Brothers are really, really famous and well-known tag teams. You of course have DX with Triple H and Shawn Michaels. Those big tag teams that have been legendary for such a long time. But at this point, in my honest opinion, I think the New Day is probably the most decorated and the most entertaining tag team we have ever seen in WWE. All three guys are so likable. Biggie Langston, of course, now having his own singles run, doing really, really well. He's been one of the better wrestlers in WWE for such a long time. And he's so entertaining on the mic, and it just overall has a really fun and cool personality. Everyone has given Kofi Kingston, Kofi Kingston is the embodiment of the underdog and what, you love to see in WWE. His huge run a couple years ago against Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania to win the WWE Championship was one of my all-time favorite moments ever in WWE history, just to see him get his chance to win it all. That was by far, I think, one of the coolest moments I've ever seen. I really wish I was there in person to see that happen. Of course, Xavier Woods, I think, is the most underrated of the group. He's a guy that doesn't really get a lot of recognition, but he is like the mic and really the kind of the leader of the group. He's the guy who really is able to entertain everyone. They kind of come up with these little gimmicks that they always have each year. They have the booty-os or the pancakes, all those fun games and everything like that. Gets involved with the crowd. The crowd loves them. They've just really rocked it, really. I mean, they spent early on, they spent some time as heels, and I think they weren't really appreciated back then. But once they were able to turn face and really get behind the crowd, I've never seen the New Day have a bad crowd ever. I think every time they see the New Day, someone's entertained and they're enjoying it. So, in my honest opinion, right now, I think they are the greatest WWE tag team ever. I just love seeing them on TV every day. I hope they never split up, and that's really rare for many tag teams. I think a lot of times you're like, let's see them split up, but I don't think I've ever thought that once for the New Day.
Yeah, they are definitely the most entertaining tag team of all time, and I'm not trying to be biased. I mean, they're my favorite tag team of all time, but I would probably say they are because, I started watching WWE in the summer of 2014. I mean, the first time the New Day was ever on TV. It was so weird because look at what they've become now. The first time they were on TV, they were actually, I don't know how to describe it. They were kind of like not preachers, but like ministers, like in a way or something like that.
Yeah, their intro was like a church choir almost. It was interesting. I really didn't like that gimmick back then. It kind of annoyed me a little bit, especially with Kofi having his own personal gimmick and Big E having his own personal gimmick, and then they just kind of ditch it all of a sudden. It got really weird. But yeah, it was they transformed over the years and they turned into almost sort of goofy kind of guys that ended up becoming very, very loved and very well known at that point. But yeah, for some reason in between, it kind of just became a bit of a kind of like a church choir thing. It was kind of funny. I really don't know how to explain it.
And you mentioned, them being, heels at first. I thought they were really good heels or faces. They're one of the few tag teams I think, were really good at both. And I mean, you mentioned, Big E, having a singles run now. Kofi had one a couple years ago. Xavier, I mean, to me, I think he's the most underrated of the group. And since I started watching wrestling and to now, I think Xavier Woods is definitely one of the most improved wrestlers since I've started watching WWE. Definitely one of the most entertaining individual wrestlers, and not just WWE, but just all of pro wrestling itself. They're so entertaining, like you said. Bootios. They had the pancakes. They had Francesca, the trombone. We actually named our car Francesca after Xavier's trombone. But I mean, they were just so entertaining. They had some great matches. They had some great feuds. I really liked the one with the Usos several years ago. They had some other ones as well. But I could understand why somebody who watched wrestling in the 90s or maybe early 2000s would say, maybe Christian Edge or the Dudley Boys or whoever it may be, Shawn Michaels and Triple H. but I never really saw those guys. I saw the Dudley Boys towards the end of their career, and just by the end of their career, I know like wrestlers in their prime towards the end are a lot different, but I wasn't really a fan of the Dudley Boys, much at all. I think the New Day is definitely the most entertaining tag team of all time. I would say they're the best, and I know that's a little bit biased, but since I started watching wrestling, I don't think anybody's even close because, they're kind of like Chris Jericho in a way because like you make something random, just basically stupid. Oh, we're going to make the top selling merchandise item. We're going to make this the top thing in wrestling right now. When it comes to just different ideas, they had freaking unicorn horns. I remember The Rock saying it looked like a llama penis or something, but it was like they just make so much different things up. Their creativeness, it's what separates them from other tag teams, and to me, what's kind of helps them solidify themselves as probably the greatest WWE tag team of all time.
Yeah, honestly, I think you could probably argue second place might still be in WWE too. That being the Usos, very well known and having that huge gimmick change a couple of years ago, changing from their cultural face painted, twins kind of self to being almost the exact opposite, being like the I really don't know exactly what to call it. They kind of just became more of a modernized, I guess, version of like. Honestly, I really don't know how to explain it. They just kind of became themselves, I guess, more or less, and really trying to change. And I think a lot of people really like them as well. But I think what kind of separates the Usos from the New Day is I think the New Day has so much individual personality. One of those guys can be by themselves, such an entertaining member of the team. They can still entertain the entire crowd. Meanwhile, when they're together, they don't skip a beat. They work so well off each other. They all have the same fun, goofy personalities. They all kind of have their own individual personalities at the same time. It just is a really good combination. And also, I think something that we really don't get to appreciate much is historically there have not been many 3-team tag teams that have really gotten over. There's always one member that kind of holds them back. It really kind of feels like that's never been the case for the New Day. All of their members have had moments where they shined before, and you could argue Xavier Woods has been maybe left behind a little bit since he's never really had a chance to win any individual titles. But at the same time, being sort of the manager of the team and also being the microphone and the guy who really, is the mouthpiece of the New Day, I think is really kind of risen him to the same level as the other guys to a certain extent, and has gotten him a lot of appreciation. So, I really enjoyed his recent match against Bobby Lashley at Hell in a Cell, even though he lost. It was on Raw in Hell of a Cell. Performing individually for one of the first times in a good bit, the first ever Hell in a Cell match on Raw. Very, very good match for Xavier Woods, and he really performed well. Getting a lot of hits in against Bobby Lashley, of course, and making things exciting, making us think that there was maybe a chance he could win somehow. It was a really entertaining match, and I really think, as you said, he's one of the most entertaining wrestlers right now in the business. And I think overall, the New Day in general is just so talented. So yeah, I have no gripes about it. I completely agree, and I'm happy they're getting the recognition they deserve.
Yeah, you mentioned the Usos. They're definitely up there for the past decade or so. When they had their original gimmick, I was not really a fan at all. But once they had like their new gimmick, like the Uso Penitentiary or whatever, how you would describe them, I like theirs a lot more because you have heel Usos against face New Day, and those feuds. They had them multiple times, right? All those feuds were just really, really good. And what you said with New Day, with trio, you don't see that in pro wrestling, it seems like, anymore, hardly at all. The only tag team that I can honestly think of the top of my head that has trios is Jurassic Express and AEW. Aside from that, I can't really think of any in the top of my head, but it just goes to show like how great they are. Like you said, the three of them, they're the best tag team. Individually, they are really good. Big E's had the, title reigns by himself. Kofi had the WrestleMania several years ago. And I think Xavier Woods is definitely capable of maybe like an Intercontinental or U.S. Championship run. Because to me, I think he's one of the more, I know I said he's the most underrated guy in a New Day. I think he's one of the more underrated guys just in all of WWE, because he's the guy who basically is New Day. Without Xavier Woods, the New Day, in my opinion, would not be nearly as good and not be nearly as entertaining or anything like that without Xavier. But I would say, they're probably the greatest tag team of all time. But if somebody would say they're not, I would completely agree, because watching WWE now and, the past several years, there's not been many great tag teams. The New Day is just one that really stands out. But if, somebody says the Dudley Boys, Christian Edge, DX, completely understand because, the eras of wrestling are just so much different from the late 90s and the early 2000s compared to what it has been the past 7 or 8 years or so. And kind of, staying on the track of wrestling. And then we kind of talked about a little about before the show. You were really happy, intrigued by, A-lister Black, Tommy Yen, Malik Black, whatever his name is going to be in AEW. He was surprised, last week, Road Rager, I believe it was. And I saw something a couple of days ago. I do not remember who it was from. It was from a top-end source in wrestling. It might have been Dave Metzler or something like that. I honestly don't remember. But he was saying, AEW has a huge event in a couple of months, I believe in September, at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in New York. And there's lots of rumors about, kind of talked about before the show, but, Daniel Bryan, which, his other name would be Bryan Danielson, going to AEW. Do you think this could actually happen? And do you think it would be smart by, Daniel Bryan going and switching companies to AEW?
Boy, it's going to be a huge change in wrestling culture as we know it if he does. Because, we are talking about, if there are any superstars that are still active that have a huge fan base that will follow him anywhere, Daniel Bryan's got to be near the top of that list. There is a huge Daniel Bryan cult that is obsessed with everything he's about. And WWE's brought him back multiple times from deadly injuries just to have that same group back. And you could tell his matches are always just have a different energy, a different feel about them that always attracts so many people towards them. Of course, Daniel Bryan's most well known for his insane WrestleMania triple threat match against Randy Orton and Batista, while he still had the injured shoulder, the separated shoulder, I believe, which was insane to watch and really, really fun to see him have that true underdog moment and be able to come back and have that insane match. But now, of course, he's getting really, really up there in age. He finally has a child now, I believe, and he's looking towards retiring soon. So I would love to see him get an opportunity at AEW. I don't see it being a very long run, maybe just a couple of, kind of like a Sting sort of idea where he just comes in and has a couple of rivalries, maybe wrestles for about a year or so, and then, leaves possibly. Do I think it happens? I'm not entirely sure. I would lean towards no at the moment. I just see him being too closely connected with WWE for such a long time for me to believe that he's leaving. And I did hear rumors recently that Nikki and Brie Bella are thinking about coming back to wrestling temporarily 1 year. So maybe he wants to stay around for that. But if not, if that never happens, certainly see it as a possibility of him maybe just trying it out and giving it a shot for a year or two. And I would love to see it. It would be really, really entertaining.
Yeah, to me, the main factor is, Brie Bella and Nikki Bella, because, I believe they were recently inducted into the, WWE Hall of Fame. And, if she returns, I think the odds of this happening are pretty much go to like 1% or 0%. But if they don't return to wrestling, I think this could happen. Honestly, AEW fans have just at different times, different there's going to be a surprise guest. They have just stupid expectations. For instance, I don't remember which pay-per-view it was, but, it was announced that, Tony Khan, it was going to, change wrestling. It was Christian Cage, guy who's in his mid-40s and hasn't wrestled on a consistent basis for like 9 years. Some people thought that could have been, Brock Lesnar or CM Punk. But to me, I don't know. I think, them having this huge venue, because, there's over 20,000, seats at that place. They're really trying to get it sold out. And the fact that they're getting on, TNT on Dynamite, not a pay-per-view, to me kind of increases the possible, chances of it happening, because you're having a huge event on TV. People who don't really watch AEW, let's see, this, and, there's a huge rumor, we've not watched wrestling for years. I wonder, who it might be. And if it's, it would turn out to be, Daniel Bryan, which would be, Bryan Danielson, that would be absolutely huge. And he's not what he used to be. Honestly, I've never been a big, Daniel Bryan fan. Obviously he has a huge fan base, and I would say he probably has a year or two, like you said. But if you're able to get him, honestly, with CM Punk, Brock Lesnar, I don't see Brock Lesnar happening at all. I don't really see CM Punk happening. Daniel Bryan to me is out of those three is easily the most likely to happen. I'm not saying it will, but just out of the three, I think if I had to pick one that could happen, it's definitely going to be Daniel Bryan because before he was with WWE, he was a huge guy, on the indie scene for years, with Ring of Honor. I think I'm not for sure. I think he might have been in New Japan. I can't remember, but we've seen Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, and basically some of the founders of AEW been the top guys at indie scenes for years now, and Daniel Bryan has a relationship with the Young Bucks. I would be very intrigued for this to happen because all of a sudden you think about Daniel Bryan, Kenny Omega. I know he's not what he used to be, but Chris Jericho is still a pretty good big draw. The Young Bucks, Moxley. I mean, all of a sudden, if you get Aleister Black to be a top star, which I think he's more than capable of possibly being, all of a sudden, they're not going to have bigger ratings than WWE. But if you get Daniel Bryan, you're going to get at least 50 to 100,000 more viewers on a consistent basis, week by week, getting a huge main draw, probably the biggest realistic free agent right now in wrestling. Because I wouldn't really consider CM Punk or Lesnar, because if Lesnar comes back, there's no chance he's going to AEW. Vince McMahon will give him a huge contract to stay. CM Punk, I don't see him returning to wrestling. But with Daniel Bryan, he's a guy who loves wrestling. It's his passion. He was not medically cleared to wrestle. Still, despite not being medically cleared, was a manager on SmackDown, and eventually got cleared. Was able to wrestle some. He's not going to be a full-time. He's going to be a part-timer like a Sting, like you mentioned. This would make so much sense. This would be a genius move. If I'm AEW, I'm paying as much money as he wants. I don't think it has anything to do with if AEW wants him. If you're AEW, you would love to have a guy like Daniel Bryan in your locker room and in your company. It's going to make you so much money. It's going to help you with ratings and everything, and make you a bigger threat to WWE. But I think it just goes down to how much, Daniel Bryan wants to continue wrestling. If he will actually leave, the WWE for AEW. We've seen this happen with Mark Henry and the Big Show. And, those are not huge draws. They were both sucky wrestlers. But the fact, they've been with WWE for so long, nobody heard anything about them. And then all of a sudden they're with, AEW. That was kind of shocking to many people. Maybe we see a similar situation with Daniel Bryan to AEW. I would say right now, I would give it about a 20% chance because I feel like there's going to be a surprise person there. But at the same time, AEW has let down people multiple times when it comes down to surprise, people. I know, Aleister Black was last week. I'm not saying that was a letdown. That was a big surprise. But other times, for instance, Tony Khan said there was going to be a huge, guy going to AEW, and we've seen Doc Gallows and Carl Anderson from Impact Wrestling and New Japan go there. That storyline, everything has just been complete utter crap. We've seen also New Japan Pro Wrestling, kind of having collab with AEW a little bit too, but nothing nearly what anybody expected. Not Okada, not Will Ospreay, or any of those guys on AEW television. I think I would say 20% chance right now. I really think there is going to be a surprise at the Arthur Ashe Stadium in September, but it's just really hard to tell if it's going to be Daniel Bryan because he's one of those WWE loyal guys. It's going to be really hard to see him leave WWE for a rival company.
And if he sticks with WWE, he's going to get plenty of other opportunities in the future, whether it's going to be in wrestling or actually back as a manager or front office member. Because, of course, I thought he performed that really well whenever he was a manager of SmackDown. He was a very entertaining manager to watch. And, of course, it was pretty fun if he got to interact with certain heels and stuff like that, of course, like The Miz. He's got a spot somewhere in WWE, and they're going to pay him a lot of money to do it. So the real question is whether or not AEW is willing to pay more than what WWE would be willing to pay. And at this point, I don't know if they have the same budget as WWE to make that a decision or not. So, of course, we'll have to see. So, it'd be really exciting to see him get his opportunity there. But at this point, I agree with you. I think it is a pretty low chance as of right now, but it is certainly something that we can, watch later down the road and see if it possibly can happen.
And something else with AEW compared to WWE. With WWE, if he signs with them, you're going to be a front office person or something like that. With AEW, the thing that I would say he would be much more intrigued by is kind of the free creative control type of deal. You can basically do whatever you want, and for the most part, if he wants to have a different character gimmick, if he wants to be even a manager, I don't think that would happen, but we've seen other guys do that with AEW. Maybe with creative control with AEW, maybe ultimately leads him there. I doubt it, but I'm very interested by this. Like I said, I'm not a huge Daniel Bryan fan, but if he goes to AEW, I'm very intrigued because imagine a match with him against like Kenny Omega or something like that. Like that has match of the year written all over it. And that's going to be, Moxley and Omega last year on Dynamite, that was, I would say, one of the biggest matches to date in AEW. But if you have Daniel Bryan and Omega, that's definitely going to, top that. The different storylines and feuds you're going to have with Daniel Bryan makes it really interesting. Who knows if this will happen? I'm not really thinking it will, but if it does, that's going, in my opinion, probably to change wrestling. And I think it's with AEW and WWE, it's going to make it a lot more interesting when it comes to ratings and a lot more competitive when it comes to two wrestling, businesses. And you've kind of been talking about wrestling here for quite a bit and kind of switching gears to football, which is, easily, for the most part, the most talked about sport, on this show. And, there's lots of, possible contract extensions. The contract extension is for players is July 15th. And a couple players here, for instance, Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Chris Godwin, his contract extension. Do you think maybe Tampa Bay should extend his contract? And if so, maybe what would you think maybe a fair salary that should be for Chris Godwin?
Yeah, Tampa Bay is in an interesting position. They're kind of, to a certain extent, strapped on salary at this point, but they somehow still managed to retain most of their players at this point. And they're going to have a little bit extra money to give Godwin to make an extension. But at the same time, if they do decide to make this, they're not going to have hardly any money at all to make a future signing in the next free agency pool. And with Tom Brady likely to be near the end of his career, we don't know how well he's going to perform next season. If he drops off somewhat, they won't have enough money to throw a contract at even a quarterback at that point. So it could be a pretty dangerous gamble if you were to re-sign Godwin. However, I definitely think they should, and I think it would make a lot of sense if they do re-sign Godwin to a certain contract extension. He's still a very, very young wide receiver. I think at this point, if you had to choose between him or Evans, I would actually lean towards Godwin due to him being a little bit younger at this point, just coming off his rookie contract, of course. So this will be his first real contract in the league. Mike Evans is getting a little bit up there in age, of course. He's hitting, I think that by now he's probably reaching his prime or already at his prime at the moment. So, I don't think it's going to go much higher or much better for Mike Evans at all. While I think Chris Godwin has a lot of room to continue to improve and get a lot better. I think this is in the next couple of years, I think we're going to start to see Godwin kind of reach and start to be above Mike Evans and talent-wise at wide receiver at this point. I think we've all expected it to come pretty soon, and it hasn't yet, but I think it will come very, very soon. And I think Tampa Bay has to take advantage of that, and they have to sign him to a big contract if they want to get him back.
What would be a contract that you believe Godwin should re-sign with Tampa Bay, or maybe something similar?
It's tough to project. I definitely think you're looking to get him for a 4 or 5 year deal if possible. I'm not sure the exact money. I don't want to say something that's completely off basis, but I'm paying him nearly the same amount of money as what I would be paying guys like Michael Thomas at this point. Even though I think Michael Thomas is a better wide receiver, Godwin's at such a young age at this point, and he's still one of the very few wide receivers, as young as he is, to be a number one option or to have the potential to be a number one option for your team. Guys like AJ Brown, trying to think of other examples. AJ Brown, Calvin Ridley, these other guys, they're going to be reaching max extensions here very soon. They're going to be getting big deals. Godwin's going to have to make money near that same area. So it would not surprise me one bit if he gets top 5 wide receiver money this offseason if they really want to have him back. If they're able to pay him less than that, if they're able to get him back at a deal that's smaller than Mike Evans' deal, I would be shocked. It would be very, very good for the Bucks. And of course, if Godwin's willing to take a pay cut, it would make sense because they're still looking to contend to try to have a chance to go further. But I don't see that being the case. If it is, it's only going to be a 1-year deal, and he might not come back next season. If they want a long-term deal, he's probably going to end up having to make top 5 wide receiver money at this point. I'm not sure the exact number of that right now. Don't have anything to look it up, but I believe it would be, it's going to be a pretty big and well-known deal whenever it does come around.
Yeah, top 5, I would say that's going to be probably over around 20 million or something around that range.
I was thinking 24, 20 million as the number. I could be wrong though. I don't want to say that and it not be the case. So I'm not sure who the highest paid wide receiver is right now. I want to say it might be Michael Thomas if I'm not mistaken. But I'm not exactly sure. I have to go look at it later.
That is very, very interesting because Chris Godwin, to me, he had a 1,000-yard season with Winston last year with Tampa Bay, and to me, I'm always going to say that was one of the most underrated seasons we'll ever see from a quarterback. I think that's an extremely hated, situation with Winston. I thought he performed much better than people thought. Godwin was, good this year when he was healthy with Tampa Bay. But to me, like after that 1,000-yard season with Winston, people are, he's a top 10 wide receiver. He's a top 12 wide receiver. I think he's really good. His age, though, kind of separates him from other people, like you mentioned with Mike Evans. It's interesting because if I'm the Buccaneers, if I would re-sign him, I'm not going to pay him like $24 million. I would pay him around 17 or 18. I don't think he would probably do that. But at the same time, look at all the Tampa Bay Buccaneers players in the roster. About half of them are on like 1-year contracts. So once Brady retires, you're not going to have nearly as many weapons or, for him to throw to or, guys in the defense that have stepped up this past season. I know you have, Devin White locked up for a few more seasons, but some of these guys, on their roster do not have, long-term contracts. I feel like if you would extend Godwin, you're kind of, not going to re-sign somebody, maybe your starters in defense or offense instead of getting Godwin to a high deal. And I think it also kind of depends on how many years Brady plays left. And it seems like we say this, every single year. But if this is Brady's last year, Brady plays, let's say 3 more years. We just don't know. And especially with somebody like Brady who just will never retire. But it's like, if Brady will retire 1 year from now, I don't think you can if you're Tampa Bay. I think you have to get I know it sounds crazy. I was talking with somebody last week. And we were talking about the Raiders, and if the Raiders perform poorly, what if the Raiders maybe trade Derek Carr? If Tom Brady would retire, if I'm the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I am 100% trading for Derek Carr. Because Derek Carr and Kyle Trask was my exact comparison in the draft with Trask was Derek Carr. I think they're very, very similar, and I think Trask could learn a lot from Carr. But I know I'm getting kind of sidetracked, but it's kind of a situation where if Brady would retire 1 year from now, extending Godwin right now, looking back, that might not be a great idea because if you got Godwin, that's good, but I don't trust Kyle Trask to take over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just 1 year setting. But if Brady plays for 2 or 3 more years, and if I'm the Buccaneers, I feel a lot more comfortable maybe re-signing Godwin. But I don't know if he's worth the top 5 range. I would say maybe top 10 to 12. But it just has a lot to determine about Brady. I think that's the main factor because, if Brady plays for a couple more years, I'm all for it. But it's just too risky right now, especially with the deadline just in a couple of days from now. I think I'll be better off trying to let him test free agency next year and maybe pay him in free agency, next offseason.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, and I can see that being the case for sure. I think that it would be smart for Tampa Bay to wait and gauge what they're going to look like as a team next year. If Tom Brady is still rolling and still having a fantastic career as a quarterback, I think you're definitely looking to re-sign Chris Godwin to a deal. But if Tom Brady's starting to fall apart and you notice that your team's slowly, slowly falling apart. You can either choose to let Godwin go or let some of the veterans go and re-sign Godwin to a very long deal and try to keep him as your centerpiece of the team for the long future. So there is several scenarios that could really change and make things different depending on how the season is turning out. So I definitely think it might be the smartest idea for Tampa Bay to wait and not exactly sign him right as soon as they can, but maybe to wait down the line until they know what they're going to look like in the future.
Yeah, and it's one of those, situations where you kind of want to do something, but you don't want to like panic and do it and then completely mess up, your team, and partially mess up your future in a way. But if Brady, he plays a year or two, I think Brady, I just really think is the main factor. I think it'll be best that Tampa Bay probably just waits and maybe tries to re-sign him, in free agency, next season. Because extending Godwin right now, I think is just way too risky, and it has potential to really mess up some of your possible stars of the future, because you might not be able to re-sign them and might not get a top quarterback of the future if Tom Brady looks to retire 1 year from now. So Godwin with Tampa Bay is going to be very interesting. With the deadline coming on the 15th, another contract extension. One of the most underrated players in the league. Jessie Bates. I'm not even going to ask you if they should extend him. It's pretty obvious they should. What do you think the price range for Bates should be?
It really is tough for Bates to gauge whether or not he is worth or how much he is worth money-wise because of the recent quarrels between Justin Simmons and the Broncos when it comes to their contract decisions. I think a lot of people are waiting on to see what happened in that area before they would decide whether or not, or before they decided how much Bates would make. But of course, the Broncos have pushed it down the line so much at this point. I believe having three franchise tags currently right now on Justin Simmons. I believe he's making somewhat near $24 million at this point now in contract extensions, which is, out of this world for a safety. But at the same time, that might be what he's asking for anyways in the contract extension. So we're not exactly sure how that's going to end up turning out. As for Bates, I think this is one of, if not the best safety right now in the league coverage-wise. As a free safety, I think it's pretty unarguable. It's really him and Minkah Fitzpatrick right now at the top of the league at this point. You have a couple of strong safeties, Budda Baker. You can argue Jamal Adams, Tyrann Mathieu, I think that are good players, good safeties. But I think at this point, you really look at Bates and Minkah being the two top guys right now, both in the same division, both playing fantastic football, of course. And it really kind of feels like Bates has been the centerpiece and really one of the very few defensive members on the Bengals that have been a very consistent superstar for the squad. They've had a lot of ups and downs as of late. Atkins hasn't been able to stay healthy, and of course they lose this year to free agency. Carlos Dunlap had his down season and is now gone, traded to the Seahawks. You had a lot of different players that were up and down the entire year. You had a very inconsistent secondary. But one thing was always very for certain, and that was Jessie Bates was going to anchor the middle of the field, and you need to keep that at all costs. It would not surprise me one bit if they make him the highest paid safety in the NFL. I would do it personally. I would give him as long as possible, 5-year contract, give him as much money as he needs. He's still a very, very young player. And in 5 years, it is very likely that he is the best safety in this league still at that point. And he's going to be consistently going to be one of the best players Cincinnati's had for a very long time. And I think if he continues to stay on this trajectory, he might end up being a future Bengals legend.
And he's the most underrated defensive player in the league. I don't think that's really really debatable. I would say he's the best safety in the league. It's not being biased. You look at some of the stats, and the coverage and everything. It's not biased. It's just stats. And, he was rated, the best free safety according to PFF last season. It's like, Justin Simmons, his extension with Denver, I believe was around 15 or 16, annually a year. Bates, to me, is definitely worth that. He's proven time and time and again. He's one of the best safeties in the league, one of the best young defensive players in the league. You look at the Bengals defense the past couple of seasons. It's just, especially last year, it was not really what anybody expected. It was really, really bad. You take Jessie Bates off that defense, we easily have the worst defense in the league. I think that's pretty obvious. Bates was phenomenal last season. He was our best player on the team. It wasn't even close. I know some people say, Burrow was good. It's Bates, I would say right now, is not just our best defensive player, but our best player in general. He is. I mean, he is just phenomenal. I mean, he's one of the best players. I mean, one of the best young guys. It would be really smart for us, obviously to extend him. If we don't extend him, people are going to basically riot. It would be a horrible situation for us to let him go because he's definitely worth that contract of 15, 16 a year, being the top, top safety in the league. But to me, I would say like a 4 or 5 year contract would be the best deal because, I mean, I think he's the best free safety right now in the league. And what you said, by the time his contract's over with, he still might be the best free safety in the league. And you kind of mentioned he might be a Bengals legend. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but if he was with the Steelers right now, people would already be talking about him being a future Hall of Famer. And I know it sounds crazy, but if he was with the Steelers, he'd be at least a 2-time All-Pro and a 2-time Pro Bowler. Bates is not a Pro Bowler. It's a popularity contest. And for instance, I mean, we could talk about Ken Riley never being in the Pro Bowl, 5th all-time interceptions. I mean, anti-Bengals bias forever. But it's the fact Bates has proven time and time and again he is just so underrated. And with his contract, potentially, if we make him the highest paid free safety in the league, he finally, gets the money he deserves and finally gets, with being the highest paid free safety in the league, finally gets the recognition around the league that he desperately deserves because he's proven just time and time again how much a vital piece he is to our defense and our team and really the future and everything.
I think base case scenario right now for both Jessie Bates and the Bengals is you're looking like a 5-year, $83 million deal at this point. I think is very likely, and that's what I would love to see from sides. I think Bates is getting that would be top safety money in the league at that point, making north of $17-18 million a year at that point, and at the same time you're having one of the best safeties in the league locked down for 5 seasons, which is fantastic. Of course, we do know the Bengals often don't guarantee a lot of that money. A lot of it's unguaranteed, and it all just depends on how they perform throughout the season. And we do know that whenever those players perform, they get paid very well. And if Bates is able to continue to perform very well, he will be paid enough to be the top safety in the league. If not, they have the chance to probably be able to exit out of those contracts near the end of his contract at that point. And at that moment, that's whenever you look to try to find a new safety to maybe replace him at that point. 28, 29 years old, that's reaching George Iloka age at that point. You're looking to maybe try to find a new guy in the future. So to see how that works out. But I definitely think Jessie Bates is looking to get a very large sum of money, and I agree with everything you said. He is a fantastic defender and needs to be a centerpiece of this team for a very, very long time. He needs to be what they look to build around at this point. And luckily, we've heard from Duke Tobin and Zach Taylor that the number one priority this offseason is to re-sign both Jessie Bates and Sam Hubbard. So it looks like they will be aiming to do that here very soon.
And you mentioned guaranteed money. I think that has also a huge factor involved because if you look at Carl Lawson, I think, pretty much the reason he signed with the Jets was because of guaranteed money. And, our contract with Trey Hendrickson, edge rusher from the Saints, last season had 13.5 sacks, but we signed him to a 4-year deal. But his guaranteed money was extremely low considering what he's, we look at his contract. I think that, agree with what you said there. I think that has a lot to determine on Bates' contract. If we, let's say 5 years, 85, kind of what you said there, if we guarantee around 10 or 11 a year or something, pretty decently high, or 12, something like that, not guaranteed at all, because I think that's way too risky for a free safety. This compared to a quarterback would be different, but I still don't understand, why some teams do that. But the guarantee money, I think, has a huge factor involved with Bates. Hopefully the Bengals can lock him up because he's our best player right now, and it's not even close. Him, along with Burrow, I think are the centerpieces of this team. And if we ever win a Super Bowl, I think we have to have, obviously Burrow at quarterback and Bates has to be, our guy on defense. So hopefully maybe we can end up re-signing him so he can play with the Bengals and eventually, retire as a Bengal and maybe get the credit he deserves and starts going to Pro Bowls and All-Pro, voting and everything like that. So kind of switching gears to baseball, I'm not a big baseball guy at all. I don't watch it like I used to. But the Home Run Derby, the Home Run Derby is actually tonight. It's in Coors Field in Colorado. Do you have any predictions on who do you think might end up winning it?
I'm very, very excited to see Shohei Ohtani and see how far and how well he's able to hit the ball in the home run derby. It's going to be very entertaining to see how that all ends up. I'm not exactly sure the entire cast of the home run derby at this point. I do know Shohei is going to be like the main guy that I think everyone's looking to look at tonight, and I am very excited. He's already hit 33 home runs this season, and of course, at the same time, he's being a starting pitcher, a DH. He's playing a lot of time with the Angels, and it has been really fun to see him play. So early favorite right now, I'll lean towards Shohei Ohtani just because of how entertaining and how hard he's been hitting the ball lately. It is fascinating to see how great of a player he is. He will be the starting pitcher in the All-Star game. He will also be batting leadoff for the AL, which is nuts to see. I don't think it's ever happened in the history of the All-Star game before. They actually had to change a couple of rules around it just to make it happen. So it is really cool to see how well he's progressed, and he's slowly becoming, I think, the most entertaining player in the league. On top of having already the best player in the league and Mike Trout on that same team, yet here they are not even in the playoff race, which is crazy to imagine. But I'm really excited to see how all that turns out.
Yeah, Ohtani, I mean, he's obviously the top draw, in the home run derby. If he wasn't in it, basically cut the ratings in half of this. I mean, everybody's wanting to see him. And, 2 years ago, we saw Pete Alonso break the record. And, there was obviously not a home run derby last season due to the, coronavirus and everything. And Alonso is actually, in it this year. Several years ago, we saw Bryce Harper, win it with the Nationals, I believe, in Washington. As a hometown, guy winning the whole thing. Then I remember in 2015, Reds fans, obviously, Ty Frazier winning it in Cincinnati. That was absolutely insane. The Rockies actually have Trevor Story, in it this year. And the Rockies not really doing good. And there's lots of rumors about Trevor Story possibly being traded, kind of like how, Ty Frazier was around that time with the Reds. I mean, you knew he wasn't going to be there much longer, go out with a bang, and win the home run derby. And something with, Coors Field, it's very similar to Great American Ballpark because those two stadiums are the stadiums that players are most likely to hit home runs with the river, close to the river and everything. I'll take Trevor Story in it. I know that's kind of unpopular, but it's just somebody who's used. I mean, playing in the home stadium, it's nothing new to him. He knows how to hit the ball and everything. But I'll probably take Trevor Story in this one.
Yeah, it's going to be a very entertaining home run derby all around. Pete Alonso is a guy that I have really enjoyed watching over the years. It kind of feels like he's either a strikeout or a home run, either time. I'm really excited to see that. I was hoping to see maybe a Cincinnati Red in there this year, maybe a Jesse Winker joining the home run derby field. Unfortunately, he didn't get the invite, but it is still going to be a very entertaining home run derby regardless. And I'm not sure, was it Ronald Acuna supposed to be in it? I'm not sure. Well, yeah. I know he just tore his ACL, so he will have to be replaced now at that point, which is very sad to see. He was an early favorite, I know, in that derby as well. So I'm really hoping to see him bounce back and hopefully get his chance next season maybe.
Yeah, and you mentioned Pete Alonso, strikeout a home run. That's basically like Adam Dunn's whole career with the Reds, it seems like a home run or 3 strikeouts in a row, basically. But home run derby tonight will be very interesting. Ohtani, clearly the fan favorite in that. It'll be really interesting to see, somebody who's playing in the home run derby then pitching in the All-Star game, the next day. That is something I don't think we've seen before. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if so, it was 100 years ago with Babe Ruth, but it's crazy. This is something that we've never seen in baseball. Last topic here, completely off topic. This is something I just thought was interesting. Trying to make it, more entertaining topics on here. I just turned 21 recently. I know you're kind of around the same age as I am. And growing up,
birthday's on the 14th in 2 more days. So
you turned 20 or 21?
20, yeah.
So, we're kind of in the same age, growing up, there was lots of shows on, Nickelodeon and Disney, Nickelodeon, there was SpongeBob, Drake and Josh, some of those shows. And another, Jimmy Neutron. And one show was the Fairly Odd Parents. And they're actually making a remake of the Fairly Odd Parents, not an animated version, basically like a sitcom show in a way, the Fairly Odd Parents. To me, this makes... Well, I'll let you go first because I basically ran about this at my house all the time. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I mean, just to start out, iconic show. for one. I loved everything about it. It was just one of the best. I mean, I remember waking up every morning, watching either SpongeBob, Fairly Odd Parents, any of those shows, Jimmy Neutron, like you mentioned. Those were like the big three shows whenever I was a kid, and the Fairly Odd Parents were one of the best. I loved watching it. I thought the animation was great. Everything about it was just perfect. And of course now, this remake, I believe you said it was going to be actual people this time. So it's going to be more of a real life show at this point. I'm not sure if it's a sitcom or what it's going to be like exactly or how it's going to work or anything. But, we talked about this before the show, and I think we pretty much agreed that, remakes are never as good as the original. And it's all it's going to do is just poison what we remembered as the Fairly Odd Parents in the future. So I really hope that they're able to not completely ruin the show, but I don't really have many high hopes for this remake.
Yeah, having it with actual people and having it animated to me is completely different. If they were to have it animated, I would still be upset, but I wouldn't be as upset because you really look, Fairly Odd Parents wasn't bad. I really feel like Jimmy Neutron and Fairly Odd Parents, growing up, they were both good. I liked Jimmy Neutron more, but they were both shows that kind of never really received the credit they deserved because, SpongeBob was just, mainstream, everywhere and stuff. But this, to me, it doesn't make any sense. Remakes demolish and ruin legacies of shows. And I'm not saying, Fairly Odd Parents is the greatest show of all time. And, they've had, multiple remakes. They had one of, with people in it with Daniela Monet from Victorious and Drake Bell from Drake and Josh. Those weren't horrible, but they weren't necessary. I mean, we've seen the iCarly reboot already. We're seeing the Rugrats reboot, which that is a completely different, that's right up there. It makes absolutely no sense because, that was an iconic show. There's no need to bring it back. I mean, I don't get how you're even going to have that. You're not going to have some random fairy, floating in the sky who's like an actual person compared to like an animated person. They're also making like the Powerpuff Girls coming back on the CW. Of all the shows that, kid shows you grew up watching, literally the Fairly Odd Parents and the Powerpuff Girls are the two animated shows that would probably be the worst possible remakes to have actual people in it. I've never heard anybody say, you know what, the Fairly Odd Parents with actual people in it would be a good idea. Never heard anybody say that. So the fact, let's bring this back on Paramount Plus or Nickelodeon, whatever it's going to be, one of those, platforms, just makes absolutely no sense. I mean, there's a time, the SpongeBob remake, Patrick has his own show. It seems like any more movies, I talked about it last week. I was with somebody with the Snake Eyes remake, and there was another remake as well, Space Jam. All movies and shows anymore just seems like they're remakes, and it's not necessary because nobody's asking for them. I know you're wanting to try to get money and stuff, but the only thing you're doing is ruining the legacy of whatever show or movie it may be, and 9 times out of 10, it absolutely sucks.
I think we're starting to see the world of TV slowly fade into obscurity. Everyone's kind of leaving it in the past now, and podcasting, Netflix, all that's been big now. That's what everyone's doing, YouTube, all of that. It really kind of feels like television and Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, all those big brands are starting to fall apart now at this point. Certain brands like Disney's always going to stay up because they have the parks and everything like that. They're fantastic. I mean, they've bought pretty much everything, and they still have a lot of really popular movies and stuff like that are still out. But it really kind of feels like Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network and those shows have kind of came to a halt at this point, and the only thing they can think to do is remake the shows that were very popular at one point. And I think that's what they're trying to do at this point, trying to bring back the SpongeBob's, the Fairly Odd Parents, the Jimmy Neutrons of the world that had a big crowd back in the day. But I don't think it's going to be nearly as well as what it did back then. It's just I agree with you, it's going to fall apart. And we'll have to see how it is. I don't want to judge the show before I even watch it. I'll check out maybe the first few episodes and see how it is. But it's very low expectations right now, and we'll have to see how it turns out. I really hope that they are able to understand that this is not the route they should take, and maybe try to look to find a different way to try to reconnect with old fans of the future.
Yeah, you mentioned Nickelodeon. There was another remake of All That, years ago, in the late 90s. There was All That, with Kenan Thompson, Amanda Bynes, some of those people. And then Cartoon Network, I really wasn't much on Cartoon Network, but I think Ben 10 or Johnny Test, I think that's coming back. And it just seems like the creativeness of shows are at an absolute all-time low. And I did see where the original Cosmo and Wanda, the people who voiced them, are going to be in it, which I do like, because if you're going to have remakes, in my opinion, always try to have the people who are in the original. But I was telling somebody the other day, it's been at least 3 years since I've actually seen a good show that's been on, more than 3 years. It seems like good shows now were made like 5 or 10 years ago. Everything now is just like a remake or a brand or a copy of, and it's just, like what you said there, is like everything is just so, like what it used to be, trying to remake something that was popular years ago. Like we've seen Star Wars and different things like that, and it just fails miserably. But I mean, this will be interesting. I'm just going ahead and say it's not going to be better than the original, because the original was pretty good. But who knows? If they make other ones, if they make Jimmy Neutron, that'll be interesting, but that'll probably suck as well. And some other things as well. But in this episode, we've kind of talked about a lot of stuff. Game 3 of the NBA Finals. Is the New Day the greatest WWE tag team of all time? Could Daniel Bryan possibly sign with AEW? Chris Godwin's contract extension and Jessie Bates' contract extension, and what that may look like. The MLB Home Run Derby tonight, and to cap it off, the Fairly Odd Parents remake, and how that would just be a horrible, horrible idea. So, Blake, can you tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yeah, follow me on my Instagram page, Stripe Pipe Cincy. I cover the Cincinnati Bengals, of course, there, and talk about pretty much everything that has to do with them. Kind of in the off season right now, so it's a little bit dead news, but I'm still going to try to make some posts every now and then. Of course, follow my website, BengalsInsiders.com. Got a bunch of writers down there dedicating and writing whenever they can about the Bengals as well. And follow me on Twitter, Blake Jude 714. Just kind of ranting about certain sports stuff there, and pretty much cover almost everything. Thank you so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely, have you on, again and stuff. I'll put the links in the description so people can follow you below. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, the Sports 2 Hunt Show. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll see you all next time on Sports 2 Hunt Show.